Hello and welcome to the Walk Around podcast. Our goal is to share with you the insights, the skills, the processes, and the leaders that are influencing the retail automotive landscape today. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Danny Vendrell, joined by Nick Funch.
What's up, Danny? Good to be here today.
Just living the dream, Nick. And our guest today is Tony Carroll. He is a Senior Automotive Strategist at Google, where he collaborates with individual dealers, dealer groups, and OEMs to consult on Google's digital solutions and to develop scalable programs that support brands and drive results. So just to kick it right off, Tony, I gotta say, Senior Automotive Strategist at Google, you gotta have an awesome perspective about what some of the opportunities are that dealers are facing right now.
Hey, happy Friday. Thanks for having me on. That would be an understatement. We certainly see a lot. Traveled. This has been a great run. I really enjoy here at Google. As you kind of mentioned earlier, I spent some time in retail and then was in the OEM space for about 12 years before being onboarded at Google, and it's been a wonderful experience. Got to meet a lot of great folks like you guys, and travel the country and meet with dealers, which is what I love. And yeah, there's no shortage of opportunity out there. I think even dealers would admit that it tends to be an antiquated approach sometimes to this business. Sometimes we're a little slow. We're a little slow to get on board with some technology, but hopefully we can talk about some of that today.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I guess I'm curious, how did you get, or walk us through a little bit about your history and how you transitioned from kind of retail into the OEM world and now into really the technology space?
Yeah. Well, I think, Google cares a lot about automotive, and it's a space that, as you guys know well, if you're not in automotive, it can be difficult to kind of come in and speak the language and understand what the clients need. And I think it's no surprise that some people that find themselves in automotive, even unintentionally, end up being in automotive for their entire career. It's just, there's kind of a running joke, I feel like, in automotive, where people say, yeah, I'm still in automotive, or it sucked me back in. But really enjoyed the OEM space. I liked retail as well. I learned a lot in retail. It started out as a college job to just kind of help pay for college. And then that turned into working for an OEM. And at the time, it was Daimler Chrysler. So dating myself a little bit, but had a good time there, learned a ton, and then ended up at going to work for Gulf States Toyota as well. And then what happened was Google was really looking to put together an automotive retail team. And I just had the pleasure of being on that team for my first 2 years at Google. And our role was really to help go around the country and educate and empower the OEMs, the regions, the field, the dealer community on how to really make sense and use Google tools efficiently, and how to work smart. We don't have, a giant sales force, which we did. We don't have Googlers that can go around and call on dealers one-on-one, but we really do our best to try to work smart and scale and provide best practices through things like our dealer guidebook and working through partners like your family there at SET there in Florida. So it's certainly been a good ride, and I'm excited to talk to you today. It sounds like we're going to talk maybe a little more about F&I today, which is always something that's been a passion point of mine.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So as you kind of have gone through that journey a little bit, you've seen the business evolve. It's evolving quickly. From your perspective, I mean, what are you kind of most excited about as we kind of sit here at the beginning of this new year?
Yeah, you're right. It has changed significantly. And I think COVID essentially was a big catalyst for, 5-6 years of change to happen all in about 5 or 6 months. There's a renewed effort around e-commerce, which I think is undeniable. We've got to move forward from an e-commerce perspective and make it easier for customers to do business with us online. It's something we've been saying for a while, but to actually do it is another thing. It requires cultural change, and we have to really embrace technology. And sometimes that's just tough to do in a dealership. We have old ways of doing things, and cultural change can be really hard. But that would be one of the things I'm really excited about. Is there is an obvious move to a bit more of an e-commerce platform, and I think that when you have that, you can really measure much more effectively, because you're able to then watch that customer journey from where it began, maybe on search or YouTube, and then watch it as it comes to the dealer site and then performs an action, and then it becomes a store visit, or in this case, from an e-commerce platform, they might conduct business online and actually convert online, buy their car online, and then you just essentially end up making the delivery.
Well, I think what's cool too is, in that e-commerce ecosystem, the customer journey being so critical, it allows a dealer to allocate resources according to where they're getting the best bang for their buck and return for their dollars, instead of just, the old newspaper ads and television ads and just trying to spread it around. You can certainly be more targeted from that standpoint.
Yeah. And I think, Tony, something that stuck out to me from what you just said, you talk about this shift to e-commerce and all the touch points along, the customer journey, whether that be YouTube, search, Google, how they interact with the dealer's site. You mentioned that requires a cultural change. What does that mean to you?
It means that folks that have been in the retail side of the business for a long time, that are used to, I know we talk about it a lot, guys, but the up bus, and we sort of enjoy this luxury of not maybe responding to leads quickly, because we know that we have maybe we're really turning inventory fast. Maybe we don't have a giant day supply, and we've been able to kind of get fat off the fact that customers are coming back to us. But look, let's face it, new car margins are not getting any bigger. That's been a trend that's been happening for quite some time. I think it's going to be imperative that we're paying much more attention to our media dollars and start focusing a little bit more on ROI and understanding, what is that best dollar spent? Like, did we have full transparency into that media dollar, and how can we measure its impact, even across channels, right? To be fair, Google's not the only way to spend our dollar, and we'll be the first to tell you that, but it's certainly an important channel. When we look at sales and we look at search interest, there is a very high correlation. In fact, when we index those two numbers, it's almost a 1-to-1 correlation when you look at new car search interest versus new car registrations. And so, with that fact, we have to take a really hard look at search if we're in the business of selling new cars. So it's certainly something that has to be on our radar. We have to think about search. We have to think about e-commerce and making it easier for them to do business with us. And for some dealerships, that's just not on our radar. Even here in 2020, going into 2021, there are some very successful dealerships that just aren't, taking advantage of this yet. And I think it's working for them right now, but I don't think it's going to work for much longer. I think that train is really leaving the station, and it's going to be, we can only survive so long off of, kind of the old ways and the old media. It's really time to embrace change and technology, especially things like search and YouTube, which is something I'm really excited about that I hope we can talk about today.
Yeah, I'd love to. So maybe in both of those kind of channels, search and video or YouTube, if I'm a dealer, I haven't really kind of started down that path, maybe more specifically with YouTube. What are some simple things I can do to kind of knock down maybe some anxiety about the either YouTube or kind of becoming more efficient with my search for my store?
Yeah, so let's start with search.
Okay. And
with search, I would put this back a little bit on the dealer, and let me explain why. You've got to educate yourself on these tools. There are some dealers that are good friends of mine. I consider them family, and I love them. And if I ask them what newspaper ad they ran last month, they could tell me what the stock number was in the fine print. They could tell me exactly what that picture looked like. If I asked them about their direct mail piece that they ran last quarter, they could tell me exactly when it dropped, how many households it went to, what the average beacon score was for that. And they'll know, Mrs. Smith came in holding that mailer. But if you ask them about search, often we hear something like, I've got a guy who does that. Let me talk to my search gal. She's awesome. Let me bring her in here. I really think that as dealerships, we've got to be more involved and start educating ourselves on how to hold our partners accountable and ask the right questions. And the way that we can get started doing that is to pay attention, be engaged, and reach out to partners like Google. And like I said, Google's not the only one. There's other companies out there that play in the digital space. And these companies provide guidebooks, right? They provide best practices, and these are free. They're just out there. You can go and download them. You can listen to webinars and podcasts like this that get recorded and shared. And then you can then start to ask questions of your partners about how you're going to market and spending those media dollars. And it'll really help, hold everyone accountable.
So if you're a dealer, what questions are you asking from Jump Street of your partner?
No, the first thing I'd ask is how we're measuring success.
Okay.
I think that's critical, and it's something that has gotten a little lost over and recently. And what happens essentially is like technology moves really fast, and we've had incredible advances in machine learning. It's really completely transformed the way that we live our lives and conduct business. And in many cases, there's even something called the machine learning effect, where it's like we don't even realize machine learning is all around us. We just kind of take it for granted. But it's we have to understand like how quickly this space is changing and educate ourselves on how to measure success. So for example, years ago, we might focus on something like impression share, which tends to be more of a static media metric, which basically lets you know how many times that your ad showed when someone looked for you, right? That's okay. Nothing inherently wrong with that. But technology evolves, right? We get more and more tools in our tool belt. And if I'm a dealer today and I have 100% impression share, but my sales went down, I'm not a happy customer.
Yeah.
Right. And if I have someone else come in and maybe I had less impression share, but my sales went up and my phone calls went up and my leads went up and my store visits went up, then I'm really happy. Right. Impression share is just this sort of static media metric that just kind of lives over here that we can manipulate however we want. So one of the things I want to do if I'm a dealer is I start to measure things that matter to me. So I want to talk about business outcomes. I want to ask how many store visits I have, which is a success metric that Google can provide. Unfortunately, it's not available to every store in the country. There are certain data thresholds that exist to receive store visits, and you do need to kind of educate yourself on what store visits are. They do have a 30-day look back. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that you allow enough time for these store visits to come in before you see how effective your media was. I also want to look at phone calls, how many people called me from those ads. And then there's a real hidden gem that people don't talk about a lot, and that is click for directions.
Okay.
It's another great one that, clearly shows that someone is expressing intent. They want to actually drive to your store, right? They're clicking for directions from a Google ad, and all of this is measurable. One of the things I learned when I was selling cars was people tend to get a little cautious and even scared when they're about to buy. So often if you're across the desk from someone and they're about to actually purchase a car, they can get nervous, and that means they're about to buy. So as a salesman, you need to be aware of this, right? Well, if someone is about to buy and they're nervous and they don't want to call you directly, what do you think they're going to do?
Drive by.
They're going to drive by. They're going to come see what inventory you have on the ground. They're going to maybe drive through on a Sunday when you're not open. And how do you think they do that? They go to Google, they look for the vehicle they want, a dealership near them, and then they click for directions and they drive by. And guess what property Google owns? Google Maps.
There you go.
Right? So, it's just important for dealers to look at those actions and get away from more static media metrics, like talking about, CPCs and impression share and some of these things that sound really cool. But when it comes to tier 3, when it comes to retail, it's really not something that the dealers should be focusing on.
So how to measure success, one question. What's another? Do you have any other kind of good questions a dealer can be asking, as they are using to self-assess their own kind of strategy?
Sure. I think, there's, search is certainly important. And I think that's low hanging fruit. So like, we want to make sure we're covered on search. That's kind of like super basic 101. If someone's looking for you, you need to make sure that you're showing up because often it's the last thing someone does before they buy. So, I would ask either my internal teams or my partners, I would ask, how my search accounts are structured. And at Google, we have some best practices that we share with the retail community. We did that back in 2017 through what was called the Google Dealer Guidebook. And then we did it again back in February this year at NADA, and that was Google Dealer Guidebook 2.0. So I would ask them, hey, what's your relationship like with Google? Are you adhering to these best practices? And can you tell me more about that? And look, these agencies are working hard. Oftentimes they are they're trying to, give you the best deal and value possible. So they may not have a giant staff. They're doing their best to, give you a reasonable monthly fee. And so they're trying their best to scale. And so they may need some time. I'm not saying that they should have the perfect answer every time. But if they don't have any answer, I'd worry about that. They need to have a basic idea of what the best practices are that are shared from Google or Facebook or anyone like that.
Mm. So you talk about search and there's the opportunities there, understanding what are the success metrics and how could that play into spend, but as well as kind of month over month, looking at the success of ads, looking how people are coming in, interacting with your store. And then you mentioned video and YouTube as well. What are some of the opportunities there that you see for dealers, especially coming into this new year?
Pretty massive. I mean, so think about it like this. Right now, if you and I go and we meet for a beer, not that I would do that because I don't like watching sports and drinking beer, right? Let's say we meet for a beer and we're watching Monday Night Football. Well, the way it's currently set up is we're going to get a commercial, and it might be for Lowe's or Home Depot. And what they're doing is they're doing their best to target that demographic, and they're hoping that maybe 1% of the population is in market. Okay, that's been going on forever. Nothing's changed. They can't come in our living room and say, hey, Tony, Carroll, we know that you're really into fishing, so we're going to serve you this ad for a fishing rod. Or Nick, we really know that you like Starbucks coffee or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever it is. They just don't have a way of doing that. It's impossible. But YouTube does. So, all three of us can go to YouTube and go to watch, Michael Jordan highlights, and we could all get served with a very different ad based on what we're interested in and what we're in market for. And the power of that is really, really mind-boggling. I mean, we've never had anything like that in the history of marketing, right? So I think dealers today, for the most part, are not taking advantage of that. They just they know YouTube's important. They just don't quite know how to go to market, what product to use, what do they do with creative, how do they measure success? And, we get it. I mean, dealers didn't grow up in this space. We know that it's foreign to many of them. But I would say that YouTube is at the top of a very short list of resources that dealers have today that they're simply not using. And guess what? It's all measurable, right? When you go to market with YouTube or search, there's no question did someone see that or did someone engage with that? We literally tell you, okay, you had X amount of million impressions. You had this percentage of people actually watched your entire video, with the sound on. And then you had this many engagements. They clicked for an appointment. They clicked to go to your website. And all this is really great stuff because then you can start to get a better idea of what worked and what didn't.
So how do you get started in that space? I mean, you need content, I'm imagining, right? Yeah,
this book has been, criticized by some and loved by some, but Good to Great talks about getting the right people on the bus.
Yeah.
And you got to have the right people on your bus. I mean, I think dealers today have so much on their plate. They're worried about personnel and inventory and, OEM relationships and floor plan. And the last thing that they really have time to do is go be a SEM expert or a YouTube expert. And so you really owe it to yourself to hire a trusted partner who's an expert in that space and who has a direct line to Google and is attending, our, many industry events, and is fully up to speed on changes in this space. I think it's really hard for dealers to do that on their own. So that's step one, is really getting the right people on the bus. And then step two is kind of going back to what we mentioned earlier, which is you got to educate yourself on this stuff and start to have an idea of like what, how to measure success, the questions to ask to hold people accountable. And here's what's funny, like it all comes back to the things that matter to you anyway, right? Like if we wanted to razzle dazzle and talk about impression share and CPCs, like that really doesn't matter to a dealer. Like what matters to a dealer is selling cars and getting people in there, in the F&I, in the box, like getting cars over the curb. Like that's truly what matters to a dealer. And so the beauty of this now is that we're in a space today with our tech to start to optimize toward these business outcomes. So how great is that, right? Like now you can literally go to Google and say, hey, what matters to me is driving the following high value actions. Or what matters to me is actually getting people to my store. I need physical store visits. And then you can go to Google and literally tell Google, okay, here's my budget. My budget is what it is, right? It's X amount of dollars per month. Google, I need you to optimize through machine learning everything that I do in my campaigns. And I want you to drive as many of these actions as possible on that budget. So see how you just now like kind of simplified your life? And so then you're going to let machine learning tools, which can do this much faster and much more efficiently than the humans can. It's just a fact that's been proven over and over. Instead of having humans go in there and manually bidding and sort of using their gut to say, well, we need to maybe change this campaign to do it a certain way, or we need to manually bid in this adjustment. You basically tell Google, I need to drive as many of these conversions as I can, and then you're off to the races. And then you can test it at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and you can start to see, did this work or did it not? But you're going to see that it worked.
That's awesome. So we talk about going to market, getting started, defining success. And one of the things that you mentioned too is just creative. And in the ads, what do they look like themselves? And so I'm curious, just with your perspective, like what does a good car dealership YouTube video ad look like? Like what are kind of the best and brightest ads kind of doing? What are they talking about?
Good question. We actually have some really helpful information on this. And I so wish that I knew this stuff off the cuff really, really well. I kind of know enough to hold my own, but I can tell you that dealers really need to embrace what's referred to. We have some incredible people here at Google that do. It's a team called Unskippable Labs, and they're essentially going in and constantly testing and seeing what creative really resonates and what do people engage with. And one of the things that's very clear is that the human element is very important. So you want to make sure that you have that in your ad. And by that, I mean like someone's face, like someone who that human element, like someone that they can really see in there. So if you have maybe your best salesperson or someone that's really personable or really relatable, if you're in a market that maybe speaks multiple languages, you have people at your dealership that probably speak those languages. And so you have this great asset there for you to put them in a YouTube advertisement or creative in this case, right? To market to your shoppers. You want to try to get away from the dealership. So I know that probably doesn't thrill some dealers because the old way is like the guy with the tuxedo and the car on the lot and the gorilla in the background. And to my dealer friends, I'm half kidding. I know that we've gotten past that in many cases, but we really want to get that vehicle away from the store. So we want to try to get it, like maybe in someone's driveway or going down a beautiful road, but something that really gets them out of, kind of that lot experience. And then what we've also seen is that we shouldn't be afraid of a call to action or pricing. People want that. That's enticing to, they're in market. In many cases if you're using, Google Audiences the way you should, chances are these ads are showing for people that are in market for your product, and they actually want to know pricing. They're eager. They want to see that payment. They want to see that call to action to learn more, view inventory, schedule an appointment. So, but the key, and I'm going off on a little tangent, which I'm sure you don't mind, but the key again is that, is the creative's important. It's absolutely important. But we also want to make sure we're getting to the right people. So unlike that ad that I said, when we're all sitting down watching Monday Night Football and we all see the same ad for Lowe's, if we use audience solutions the way that we're supposed to, and these are things like in-market audiences, right, which is a great one with auto, and we are using the right strategy and tactics, then we just got a huge leg up, because we are now putting our creative in front of somebody who really wants to see it. They're eager to engage. They've shown through their behavior that they are interested in learning about payments and test drives and safety reviews. And so we just increased our odds big time by putting it in front of those people instead of just general population.
It's interesting, just thinking, we spoke at one point around the dealer who knows the mail piece they ran last quarter and how many pieces went out, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The reality is they set you still do mail, you set parameters about who that target audience, right? And so now what I'm hearing you say is, hey, take the same kind of targeted approach that you do with some old school mediums and apply it to technology, and chances are you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think this is a good segue. So here's the difference that I would say. We definitely care about all of that data that we get from our partners. Okay. And I'm not going to name them here, but there are a lot of wonderful partners out there that have incredible amounts of data. And frankly, they have data that Google doesn't have.
Right.
It's nice to know what the household income is. It's nice to know what your current car payment is. It's nice to know that you have, maybe you're currently driving a Toyota Corolla and you have a Honda Civic in the driveway. It's nice to know what equity position you're in, right? So all of these are super important, but I'll ask you this. What's more important, knowing all of that or knowing that I just searched for a Honda Odyssey 3 times in the past 48 hours?
Yeah.
Pretty powerful stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we really tap into the power of search, and it really gets back to intent. The power of intent is really how can we get to a place where we can harness all that power of knowing when someone is really in market, and then going after that shopper. And an analogy I would use for direct mail would be with something like TrueView, for example. TrueView is a product through YouTube. It's an advertising product that you click on to skip if you don't want to see it. You guys ever clicked on skip?
Every day.
Multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Same here. I click skip all the time. So imagine this. Imagine if, first of all, the way that works is when the ad pops up right before you're going to watch your video and you have about 5 seconds to skip. Well, when you hit skip, you're not charged. The advertiser is not charged for that. So imagine this. Imagine if I am selling you a direct mail campaign, and I say, okay, Nick, this is the best direct mail campaign you've ever seen. My data is superior to any data you're going to find. Everyone that this is going to drop to is in market for a vehicle. They all have Beacon scores over 700. I'm going to drop it 2 days before payday, and I've got approved creative, and it's on the most beautiful card stock you've ever seen. Are you in or you out? Well, you're super interested, right?
Yeah.
What if I said, and to make this deal a little sweeter, I am going to not charge you for every single piece of mail that someone does not open. So if they go to their mailbox and they throw it away, I will not charge you for those mailers. You get a credit for any one of those mailers. And as you just fell out of your chair,
yeah.
And anyone who opens a mailer and then reads the first paragraph but then doesn't read any of it, I'm not going to charge you for those either. I'm only going to charge you for mail that you open, you read the entire thing, and then after that, it's up to you. I will charge you for those. Can you imagine the response, from our dealer community? I mean, to be here, sign, here's a check, right?
Yeah.
Well, to be clear, that's exactly what YouTube does. It's exactly what YouTube does, and it's called TrueView. So great product, something I would suggest dealers take a hard look at if they're looking to, get in front of their customers, in-market customers, and do it in a smart, efficient way.
That's awesome. Danny, Tony, this has been fantastic. I've learned, I think, a lot. My eyes have been opened a little bit. Danny, what'd you take out of today's conversation?
It just sounds like there's such an opportunity out there. We talk about search, we talk about YouTube and measuring success, understanding what it is, the metrics that are out there, how they really align to what your personal goals are. And there's tools out there, and Google's one of them, that allows you to connect to people that are really more interested and have that high intent, like you said, but then also measure success as you go. And so I think it's just a huge opportunity. And I'm definitely going to, right after we finish here, read the Google Dealer Guidebook 2.0, because I need to know what's in there for sure. What about you, Nick?
I think for me, you got to start by educating yourself. And I think we all have varying degrees of understanding of kind of how all this works. And any amount of education is going to level up kind of that understanding. And so if you're entry level and, the first step is getting an education, or if you have more of advanced knowledge, it's what can you do to be a little more strategic in your approach. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. I think it's going to help dealers on the right trajectory for 2021. And Tony, we appreciate your time today. This has been great. We'd love to have you back.
For sure.
I love that. Thank you so much. I can talk about this stuff all day, and I'd look forward to it.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
And be sure to like this podcast, like the walk around, click share it with your friends, and pass it along, and then shoot us a note, other interesting topics you want to know about.
For sure. Thanks for listening.